In the news tonight, Saudi Arabia arrests 93 people suspected of belonging to Daesh, including 2 people who planned a failed suicide car bombing against the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. 18-year-old Palestinian Mohammed Saleh, shot by Israeli soldiers in the occupied West Bank, dies in his wounds in hospital. And the Vatican and the United Nations come together to warn the world of the effect of climate change, and the Pope says man is primarily responsible for global warming. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. His Majesty the King begins an official visit to Ottawa tomorrow, where he will meet with the Governor-General of Canada, David Johnston, Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and a number of senior officials. The two sides will discuss ways to boost bilateral relations in various fields and will review ongoing developments on both the regional and international scenes. The royal visit to Canada comes at a time when Jordan-Canadian ties are witnessing substantial developments in the trade and economic field, especially after a bilateral free trade agreement came into effect in late 2012. Jordan and Canada are bound by a number of other agreements in the investment, labor and environmental sectors. And over to Yemen, and Saudi-led aircraft targeted the homes of senior military commanders of the Houthi rebels today, causing significant structural damage. The homes are believed to belong to top Houthi military commander Abdullah Yahya al-Hakim and the rebel commander Mohammed al-Houthi. But there were no information on whether al-Hakim or al-Houthi were in their homes at the time of the attack, and there were no reports of casualties. Warplanes also struck the area around the presidential compound in Sana'a for seconds say, while heavy streets fighting continued in the strategic city of Taz in central Yemen. Meanwhile, medical sources said at least 15 people were killed in heavy fighting between Houthi fighters and tribesmen in Marib province in central Yemen. Later in the afternoon, the coalition bombed the runway of Sana'a airport to prevent an Iranian plane from landing in the Yemeni capital. The coalition spokesman, Brigadier General Ahmed Asiri, said the plane had not coordinated with the coalition authorities and the pilot had ignored a warning to turn back. The bombing of the runway made it unstable for planned aid flights, he said. Saudi Arabia has arrested 93 people suspected of belonging to Daesh terrorist group, including 2 people who planned a failed suicide car bombing against the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. An Interior Ministry statement carried by the official Saudi press agency said the 93 included at least 77 Saudi nationals. A cell involving 2 Syrians and a Saudi had planned a suicide car bombing against the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, but the plot was detected last month. The ministry said earlier today it arrested a second suspect involved in separate shootings in March and April that killed 2 Saudi policemen on instruction from Daesh. Over to Syria, and Syrian television quoting the foreign ministry said the Turkish army has provided support, fire and logistical help to enable terrorist group to capture the city of Idlib and the strategic town of Jisr al-Shughur. This is direct Turkish aggression on Syria, the statement said. Syria has recently stepped up its accusation that Turkey is aiding opposition fighters in its civil war and allowing thousands of foreign jihadi fighters into the country. Ankara has rejected the charges. In a further blow to the Syrian army yesterday, a coalition of radical armed groups seized an army base in northwestern Syria, bringing them closer to Latakia. A Palestinian shot by Israeli soldiers in the occupied West Bank died of his wounds, according to a hospital official. Mohammed Saleh was the 3rd Palestinian killed in a flare-up of violence over the past 3 days. The Israeli military said soldiers spotted several Palestinians trying to cut through Israel's barrier in the West Bank near the Jewish settlement of Shakid yesterday and called on them to halt. The military spokesman said when they refused, the forces responded with fire. One of Saleh's relatives said the teenager was walking in the field near the barrier after a wedding celebration and had not attempted to cross it. They said he was unarmed and on his way home. Iranian forces boarded a Marshall Island flag cargo ship in the Arab Gulf after patrol boats fired warning shots across its bow and ordered it deeper into Iranian water. U.S. planes and a destroyer were monitoring the situation after the vessel, the MV Maersk Tigris, made a distress call in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Tasnim news agency said it was a civil matter with no military or political dimension, but the Pentagon described it as an apparent provocation. Saudi-owned Al Arabiya television earlier said an Iranian force fired on and seized a U.S. cargo ship with 34 U.S. sailors on board and directed it to the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. But the Pentagon spokesman said there were no U.S. citizens on board the ship. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour has received the 24th Audit Bureau annual report, which indicates a major decrease in financial and administrative corruption. The Bureau's President, Mustafa Barai, presented the report on the to the Prime Minister after handing similar copies to both speakers of the House of Parliament. Mansour reaffirmed his government's full support to the Bureau in its mandate to monitor the safeguard public money. The Prime Minister also directed ministries and public agencies to fully cooperate with the Bureau and to act on comments stated in the report that urged increased control over government performance, including spending. Separately, the Prime Minister and U.S. company's AES Operation Director Bernard Santos discussed the company's future investment projects in the kingdom. Mansour stressed his government's support of investment in the power and renewable energy sectors as part of efforts to ensure energy security for Jordan. A 25-megawatt solar panel project by AES was approved by the government, aiming to reduce diesel consumption and costs. In a step to further promote investment in the sector, the Cabinet is permitting electricity generating companies to submit their bids directly to the Energy Ministry. An early childhood reading and math project, RAMP, was launched today at Dahed Al-Amir Al-Hassan Elementary Co-ed School in Amman. RAMP is a $48 million five-year project funded by the United States and the United Kingdom and is designed to improve reading and math skills of children from KG1 to grade 3. RTI International, in partnership with the Queen Rania Teacher Academy, among other institutions, are leading the program. Her Majesty Queen Rania signaled the launch at a ceremony attended by Minister of Education Mohammed Znebat, who said improving the quality of reading and math skills among preschool and early grade students is a major focus of his ministry. U.S. Ambassador to Jordan Alice Wells, also present at the lunch, said the program will promote a culture of reading among young Jordanians and will ensure competitive, relevant, of high-quality education. Her Majesty toured the school and met with children and mothers being trained on how to use the program with the children at home. Foreign Minister Nasser Judeh met in New York with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Egyptian Foreign Minister Samih Shukri as part of continued coordination and consultation with the two countries on regional issues. Discussions during the meeting dealt with the political and security situation in Yemen, as well as the importance of full cooperation with members of Saudi-led coalition to support legitimacy in Yemen. The three ministers also reviewed developments in Syria, Iraq, and Libya, in addition to the ongoing international effort to counter terrorism and extremism. U.S. President Barack Obama said rioting in Baltimore emphasized the need for national soul searching, referring to the way police forces deal with the public. Obama, in his first public statement about a Maryland black man who died of a broken spine after being arrested, said such cases are not new. He denounced those who looted stores and damaged cars in response to the death of Freddie Gray as criminals and thugs, saying their violence was unfairly overshadowed the preceding days of peaceful protest. Obama spoke at length about Baltimore at a news conference with visiting Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The Vatican and the United Nations came together to warn the world of the effect of climate change, highlighting the role that human activities play in helping change global weather patterns. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon discussed climate change with the Pope before opening the one-day conference of scientists and religious leaders called The Moral Dimensions of Climate Change and Sustainable Development, hosted by the Pontifical Academy of Science. The Pope said he believes man is primarily responsible for climate change, while the UN chief urged industrialized countries to invest in clean energy and reduce their carbon footprints.
Leaders gathered here today, together with the scientists, are united in reminding us that addressing climate change is an urgent moral imperative. Caring for the planet and caring for those who suffer from climate impacts, especially the poor and most vulnerable, is a moral responsibility. All people of faith and conscience can agree on this. But what is clear, what is important is their moral commitment for political leaders, their political will. That is important, to mobilize the will of the people and to lead the people. It requires that not only scientists, the economists, every citizen, every one of you should be part of this process.
Britain's biggest selling newspaper, The Sun, arranged a stunt bus to drive by the London hospital where the Duchess of Cambridge Kate is due to give birth anytime now. The double-decker red bus took around a dozen royal enthusiasts on a short journey, passing in front of the Linda Wing at St. Mary's Hospital. But the large vehicle blocked the road, meaning an ambulance had difficulty getting through. Photographers had to move traffic bollards to allow the on-call ambulance through. The fans on board the stunt bus have been camped outside the hospital since the 16th, waiting for the Duchess to be admitted. Dressed in Union Jack flag suit, they waved flags on the top deck of the bus to the sound of Land of Hope and Glory blaring. A self-styled French Spider-Man who has made a name for himself for climbing some of the world's tallest buildings without permission is called Paris' tallest building in the Montparnasse Tower to express his support to the victim of the earthquake in Nepal. With special bindings on his hands, he nipped from window to window to the top of the tower in less than 50 minutes and installed a flag of Nepal on his way to the rooftop. Robert, who has climbed over 100 buildings, including the New York Times building and Burj Khalifa in Dubai, said that he felt like sending a message of support for the victims of the devastating earthquake in Nepal. Robert carried some Buddhist praying flags along his session for the same purpose. And over to Turkey, Italy's Davide Rebellin won the third stage of the Tour of Turkey, on to take over the Britain's Mark Cavendish as the overall race leader. The 43-year-old beat Croatia's Christian Durasek in the mountain finish of the 165-kilometer stage between Kemer and El Mali to win by 7 seconds, with Argentina's Eduardo Sepulveda finishing a further 43 seconds back in third. Among the first group of breakaway, Rebellion and Durasek built up a minute lead over the chasing pack with 3 kilometers remaining. And finally, a look at the weather. Moderate conditions continue across most regions tonight with southwesterly light winds. A further rise in temperature is in forecast for tomorrow, raising temperature to above the 30-degree mark across much of the hilly areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect very hot conditions tomorrow with a high of 40 degrees Celsius with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, here's a recap of our top stories. Saudi Arabia arrests 93 people suspected of belonging to Daesh, including 2 people who planned a failed suicide car bombing against the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. 18-year-old Palestinian Mohammed Saleh, shot by Israeli soldiers in the occupied West Bank, dies of his wounds in hospital. And the Vatican and the United Nations come together to warn the world of the effects of climate change, and the Pope says man is primarily responsible for global warming. And with this we come to an end. I'm Farah Ajlouni. Thank you for watching and have a good night.